G'day, Glenn Morris here from the Smart Energy Lab. And today, another one of these kind of fun two-up interviews. I've got Markus Lambert from Your Energy Answers here on the channel today. And I'm very pleased to have a chat with Markus about all things to do with the Cheaper Home Battery Program. Welcome, Markus.
Thank you, Glenn. So we now just had the minister come out yesterday. He was at Solar Hub in Canberra. He was very happy to announce that we have now had 40,000 batteries come through. And I think these are about 6-week numbers. So we're looking at about 1,500 batteries per installation day, which is an enormous number. I mean, have you picked up how popular it is?
It's absolutely incredible. Just last week, I gave a public talk at my local town to about 150 people, and it was the number one question. In fact, the number two question was which brand, which I always try to dodge, actually.
If I ask you straight away that question at the beginning, Glenn, what brand do you recommend?
Well, I've got an easy answer to that one. I'll tell you in 10 years.
Yeah. Hindsight is a great teacher, isn't it? We had LG Chem and we had Tesla, and we learned a lot. And yeah, these brands are coming and sometimes going. Interesting. Yes, it's true. But talking about the run rate and the 40,000, initially when the minister said it's 1 million batteries and 2.3 billion has been set aside, that in my math says it's $2,300 times 1 million times. But what I see is the majority of rebates that are going out are $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 because the systems are 20, 30, and 40 kilowatt hours. So that would mean we're only looking at 250,000 systems before the 2.3 is reached. And on that run rate, we're looking next year, April, May, not 2030. Do you have any idea what might happen after that?
Yeah, so I think they underestimated the size that people would choose. I mean, looking at the stats, the average size is 17.8 kilowatt hours at the moment, which is really quite a substantial increase from the previous norm, which was below 10. So, yeah, they've really gone big. The minister did announce, so Chris Bowen announced the program, and he said it would be budgeted, or it had been budgeted for $2.3 billion, but it was uncapped. Now, uncapped means that they'd have to, add it to the next budget. So hopefully the program will continue even when the $2.3 billion is spent.
Right. So Bowen's going to Charma and says, my 5-year program, I'm running low at 5 months. Interesting. But
well, I think you can back it up with, what it's achieved. It's already basically installing every week effectively a big battery, similar to the big utility batteries, but in the homes and businesses of Australians.
So before I have a second question on that one in terms of all the batteries that are installed, but I would personally argue that if the money runs out and then new money has to be found, and obviously then it can become a bit of an argy-bargy, that I would expect the minister to really make announcements beforehand to keep the industry really informed. Because let's say, for example, just the really idea, if they move it into normal STCs and the STCs would drop, you would want the installers to know at least 2, 3, 4 months up front so that they can prepare quotes and all that in line of that, because some people are booked out 12 weeks. They don't want to give out quotes, and then the STC changes and then suddenly they are calling, they're carrying that. So it's probably very important that the minister keeps on having that dialogue with the industry, which I have to give to him. He has done well.
Yeah, maybe I should explain the difference between STCs and so-called battery STCs.
Right.
So the Small-Scale Renewable Energy Scheme, which has been running for decades, has a mechanism called Small-Scale Technology Certificates, which are a tradable entity. Liable parties like energy retailers have to purchase these certificates on an open market. So the price goes up and down with supply and demand. It's been hovering around the mid-30s for some time now, but it has dipped as low as $18. Now, the federal government's announcement of the Cheaper Home Batteries program linked it to a new kind of STC reckoning, which was where the government would pre-purchase those STCs at $40 each, which is the floor price. And so that effectively meant that there was no volatility in the price of STCs. Of course, any retailer who accepts as a point of sale discount will have to have some admin costs on top. And so, it's around probably $37, $38 is what the end user would see for a battery STC. But as you said, if they moved away from that and started just issuing them as standard STCs, we would fall back into a supply, possibly oversupply market, and the price would drop.
Mm. And all I'm saying is, if there are any such plans, you'd want to know early enough as a solar retailer and as an end customer. But it's undoubtedly that going to December that the rebates will drop, and so whoever is buying now is possibly buying at the peak of the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the key messages today is get in early, because the rebate is scheduled to reduce each year back to down to 2030. And so the best benefit will be in the first year.
Right. Now, you said we're adding one battery literally a week, one of those large batteries that we celebrated every time they were putting the ribbon around and the minister opening it. One of them was coming a week just through the small pieces. What does that do to the grid over time?
Well, a calming influence. So adding energy storage to the grid helps stabilize the grid. It provides a bunch of services. It gets a bit technical, but there's services known as FCAS, frequency control and ancillary services, where when the frequency of the grid starts to wobble a little bit, a battery can respond faster than any other service. It can respond in millisecond time and stabilize the grid. It doesn't have to do it for very long, even just for a few seconds or even a minute or so to stabilize the grid. That's one benefit. The other is it can help absorb surplus renewables. When there's too much renewables being injected into the grid, as we do with rooftop solar. Rooftop solar, by the way, is double utility solar at the moment. So it is the big mover in terms of renewable energy. Batteries, big batteries, and even aggregation of small batteries, and we'll talk about VPPs in a bit, can soak up that solar surplus and therefore give more benefit, more renewable component to the grid, and more stability.
Right. That brings me to another question then, really, which is we're building these big solar farms and wind farms outside the cities, the transmission lines, all sorts of people get cranky with it and all that. Why don't we rethink this policy a little bit and put much more on roofs closer to the city with batteries and smaller systems and just actually get it where it gets used? Would save a lot of money in terms of the transmission lines. Has that ever been raised in some of those forums that you attend?
Well, that's the brilliance about the Cheaper Home Batteries program. It's self-use first, rather than export it or put transmission lines from a distant solar or wind farm back to where the customers are, which is sitting in capital cities. So the Cheaper Home Battery program is an excellent solution to reticulation of energy across the state. It's being basically generated and consumed in the residence or business.
Right. Look, I just want to kind of get to another point, which is at the moment that we're seeing a lot of the very cheap stuff coming out now too. And some customers might be very tempted to go with a very, very cheap battery. And we know that some really well-designed schemes that help a lot. For example, the Pink Bat scheme, personally, I took benefit of it. It wiped my electricity bill out a lot because the house was much more insulated. It was actually a good program. It was the implementation that had some issues where the wrong people did the wrong thing and all the good people paid the price again, which happens quite regularly around society sometimes. In this case, I've seen offers where the solar retailer brought the product in directly from overseas. And therefore, I want to point out that the label of protection for the end customer in terms of warranty is much less than if they would actually buy it from a solar retailer which uses the normal chain of command, so to speak, in the distribution channel. Can you kind of explain the difference?
Yeah, maybe I'll even go back a little bit. I think the government learned a lot from the Pink Bat scheme and realised that it's important to have a lot of safeguards around any incentive, which would likely bring in the so-called, carpetbaggers, the cheap and dodgies. So we saw with the solar programs introduction of the requirement for accreditation. So solar installers have to do special training and have to be accredited with Solar Accreditation Australia. Additionally, the retailers have to be registered through the Clean Energy Council's or former service. I can't remember the acronym for it now. And the products have to be listed on the Clean Energy Council's approved product list, which helped weed out a lot of counterfeit and dodgy product. So they did that, but now we've got probably the next level, which is how do you choose a reputable supplier of product? And I think what you've said is very relevant, which is under Australian consumer law, unless a company has a registered office in Australia, the warranty falls back on the supplier, which is often a retailer or even an installer. And if they go out of business, there's no one to chase. So you really want to be sure that you're purchasing from a product from a company that has a reputation and is represented in Australia. And that's often what distributors would choose. So a distributor is someone who purchases product to sell to installers and retailers. And distributors are very concerned about carrying the can because they are part of that liability chain. And so they'll be looking very closely at the product to make sure that it meets all the requirements of Australian consumer law.
So you're basically saying if I buy a major brand that has a big presence in Australia in a battery, and then that particular brand has a distributor, and then that distributor has a solar retailer, and I've bought the product from them, and let's say there's a warranty issue in 4 or 5 years' time, I can go to my solar retailer. If he, for whatever reason, has decided not to be there, I still have the distributor and I still have the manufacturer. So I literally jump out of the plane with 3 parachutes. But in case of me buying the cheapest system that somebody directly imported, I've only got 1 parachute, and even that one might already have a hole.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what question should I therefore ask the guy that sells me a really quite cheap battery?
Yeah, I guess you'd be asking things like, are you purchasing through one of the major distributors in Australia who back up product, often with support as well? Some of them will provide the support services, but it's very important to sort of look at that value chain and that liability chain as well. I mean, the reason why some products are very cheap is because there's no middlemen who have to take a small cut because they're wearing some of that liability. And so you really got no insurance if you're going for the cheapest product that's direct imported and being sold without any backup of a company being represented in Australia.
So really, I mean, there are some questions by the customer to ask at the beginning because we're only getting the rebate once. If you dip into the wrong jar and you buy something that's not that good, I would argue down the track with the weight these batteries have, you might even have to pay somebody to get it out of your house because it's not just going to walk out there if it doesn't work anymore, is it? What do you do with a system that failed where there's no support?
Yeah, well, it's actually happened to me a few times. Products that the company's gone bankrupt. Actually, the manufacturer has gone bankrupt, and you end up with a product that is difficult to dispose of. You can't put it in the waste because it's e-waste. It's often hazardous e-waste, so you don't want to be caught with a product that you can't use and you can't get a warranty on,
And can't get rid of.
and you can't get rid of it.
Yeah. All right. Now, last one. I found it interesting. The minister said that in order to get the rebate, that you actually have to have a system that is VPP enabled. Can you explain briefly what the whole VPP is, and why didn't they actually insist then that you go onto a VPP? Because I would argue that you get the most benefits for the grid by being engaged in a VPP.
Yeah, so the term VPP is virtual power plant. And so it's the aggregation of lots of small systems like in homes and businesses through communication, so through an agent that communicates with a aggregator. And the aggregator then can control those small systems in homes and businesses. The way they can control them is providing instructions via the internet through comms to charge or discharge at certain times. But because you've given away some of the control over your system, they provide you with a much higher rate for your electricity. You even get paid to charge your battery under a VPP because actually charging a battery is just as valuable as supplying energy to the grid when there's a deficit. So a VPP can add extra value.
So what you're saying, when all the solar is spilling, there's actually something that's called a minus price, where actually the retailers, is the retailers or the distributors, have to actually pay if they want to put electricity back into the grid where a coal-fired power station they can't quickly turn off. So if you're actually being a absorber of that electricity at that point in time, you actually get paid to take electricity in the current system.
Well, you're saving the retailer from paying that negative price.
Mm.
I mean, the irony is if they provide electricity to you, they have to pay for that negative price. So it's costing them to supply you.
Right. It used to be much easier in the olden days. But why do you think we had the VPP enablement rules and it applies even to off-grid?
Interesting one. I don't know the real reason. I'm just hypothesizing here, but the fact that you can get extra financial benefit choosing the right VPP. Now, it's not fairy dust. You don't just sprinkle it on and it's always better, because there is usually a fee to join a VPP. Several $100s a year typically, and so unless it's providing enough benefit to cover that fee, it may not be a winner. It also might be that it's choosing to use your energy when you want to use it. So you've got a full battery and it's a hot afternoon and the sun's going down, and suddenly your battery's discharging to the grid because that's the condition that your VPP's on. So be careful of the rules around it and the conditions for that VPP. But the reason I think is also that a VPP can provide that service to the grid to help stabilize it. So it can't do things like FCAS, it's not fast enough, but it certainly can do energy shifting. So when there's surplus renewables on the grid, it can soak it up and keep the grid stable. So in a way, a VPP is another mechanism to give the grid some benefit. But the second part of your question about why do off-grid systems require to have VPP enabled systems, well, you don't have to, but if you don't, you have to be more than 1 kilometre or cost more than $30,000 to connect. So you have to be truly off-grid. And I think the rationale there is if you're quite close to the grid, you may choose to connect to it at a later stage. And so they want that VPP functionality available should you choose to take your off-grid system onto the grid.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Now, would you say that with the way that the feed-in tariff has really just in July gone down to 2, 3, 4 cents, that looking forward in this industry, even when the rebate is down, it'll be mainly now solar and batteries to be sold in a combo? Or do you think we're going back when the rebate exhausts more and more to just solar sales again? What's your prediction for the future there?
You should come to Victoria where it's 0.002 cents feed-in tariff, which is it's
I thought I was ripped off in New South Wales.
That's as close as you can get to zero without being zero, I think. Yeah, I think the days of feed-in tariffs are long gone. They were sort of incentives, and they were good ones in a way, but they were a little bit overheated.
60 cents.
Oh, you lucky man. Yeah. A bit of hindsight would have been useful. Everyone should have put in a 5 kilowatt PV array back then. But yeah, no, I think the feed-in tariffs are not the way to go. It's all about self-use as an end user. So the cheapest electricity is the electricity you never needed. So energy efficiency first. Second is the electricity you generate, you use yourself. So directly off your solar, directly to loads. And third is the energy that you captured and used at a later stage. And that's what a battery provides.
So you're saying it's going to be solar and battery sales much, much more than solar only?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Actually, I was in South Africa earlier this year and they sell more battery systems than solar systems.
Wow. What's the reason for that? Last little question.
It's a little bit different.
They take it out of the grid at a cheap point and then use it at the expensive point, or?
Two reasons. The time of use tariffs. So you're playing the game of arbitrage, basically buying electricity when it's cheap and using it when it's expensive, but also because of load shedding. They have scheduled load shedding in many countries, including South Africa. And so you're going to lose power for a couple of hours, possibly every day. And so you need a backup system.
Well, we're not in that situation yet. But look, Glenn, it's actually really lovely to have somebody who's informed the public now for I don't know how many years you have done it, about it, and really sharing your thoughts with us. And I really enjoy that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Markus.
Now, I do have one last question. Now, Glenn, I actually have created a situation in my own house where I have gone and decided to get a 48 kilowatt hour battery with my 32 kilowatt hour solar system. So it's a big system for two families. But I actually want to try to go off-grid in the city. What do you think?
Okay. I've actually had a couple of customers who chose to leave the grid, and it's interesting their motivation. The first one was because they didn't want a smart meter. That's all. They didn't want a smart meter. Their only
Big
option
brother.
was, Big Brother. The second was they wanted to be autonomous. They wanted to be guaranteed that they could run completely on their own reserves and resources. And so you could call that your deep green customer or your prepper, but it's a pretty unusual choice. The big problem is, unless you can size it so that for the very worst combination of loads and generation throughout the whole year, which could be in the middle of winter here in Melbourne, that you still have enough. Because if you don't, the lights are going to go out. And what normally happens in an off-grid system is you'll have some reserve, such as a generator backup. But in suburbia, having a generator in your back garden is not going to be very popular. And also, it's maintenance and expense of fuel.
Right. So me sitting on a bike pedaling really fast is not going to do it.
Yes, around about 100 watts is comfortable. So, yeah.
All right. Look, I'm going to give it a go over summer and then see what happens. But you're right. When we get 4 or 5 days of rain, 48 kilowatt hours, you got to be very sparingly. But even in the rain, I've checked it already out. My solar system on a good day, fully rain, is still doing about 2 kilowatt hours every hour in the rain period. So I am still filling the battery up even on a rainy day. So I think I'm going to make a video about it and tell the world how it feels when you go off grid in the city.
I have a question for you. What size inverter do you have?
I have it's 3-phase, and I have a 25 kilowatt and a 5 kilowatt.
Okay, so 25 kilowatt on your storage unit and a 5 kilowatt.
Oh, no. On the battery itself, which is AC coupled, I have a 30 kilowatt inverter.
All right, you have gone big. Okay, so that's really the top end of residential scale. But one thing to consider is if you are choosing to, let's say, flick the main switch during summer and just run off your own reserves, is that you have enough instantaneous power in your inverter to run the peak loads that can occur in your home. And it's surprising how those peaks can get very big for short periods of time. I often call the kitchen the nightmare of a home because it's got the most appliances that you synchronize. You get up in the morning, you turn on the coffee machine, the dishwasher, the microwave oven, the toaster, the kettle, maybe the induction cooker, and before you know it,
Air
you're
fryer.
up over 10, and the air fryer, and you're up to like 15 kilowatts. So you need that reserve to cope with that peak, which most of the time you might be using less than a kilowatt.
Look, all I know is that they looked at my load profile and they threw the 6mm cable away and got something much bigger out. I think we should be okay on that. But again, really thank you for your thoughts, Glenn. It was great. Really very much enjoy. And my last question, which you answered before, but we like to have it at the end. Come on, mate. Give me a brand that you really like. What would you recommend in 10 years?
Okay, it's a bit like asking me what my favorite child is, because I've got many favorites and they have different characteristics, and it sort of depends what I want to do. I mean, here at the Smart Energy Lab, at any one time we'll have like 20 different inverters under test, and so they all perform differently. Some are better for off-grid, some are better for on-grid, some provide much better peaked surge ratings. So if you are going to turn off your home over summer, you've got to consider those surge ratings. Some of them look good. The aesthetic is the winning number. People go, well, it's just going to look great on the side of my house. So there's lots of factors to consider. What is your favorite brand? I have had on my own house probably 10 different brands. They've all worked, and I've had no problems with any of them. So
you
I don't want to
them
pick
out
a winner.
after time, do you? Like you try one for a while and then you swap it out. You're like the rich people with their different cars in the garage, is it?
Well, yes. In fact, because we do real-world testing here, I actually put them on many of my neighbours' homes. I live on an off-grid community, Miramura Co-op, and so we are on one title. So I can put systems on lots of houses, and they're on a microgrid, so we actually share the energy around the microgrid.
So, look, with neighborhoods and all that, people come sometimes around and ask to borrow an egg. You actually come and say, would you please take my battery, would you?
Yes, I knock on their door and say, would you like a 48 kilowatt hour battery with 15 kilowatts of solar on your roof? And they go, twist my arm, Glenn.
How good is that? All right. Well, thank you very much, Glenn. Great to talk to you.
Likewise.
See ya.
Thanks very much, Marcus. It's a great chat. Really enjoy watching your show, Your Energy Answers. It's as the name suggests, it provides great service to the community. But we all learn by investigating what other people know, and that's something that you guys have done really well. So anyway, everyone, thanks for watching another Toolbox Tech Talk, and I'll be back next Sunday at 1:00. Check it.